Alright, so Tacoma, the mecca of all museums in Washington State, including the May Auto Museum, is having a Let's Ride exhibit at their history museum. So we're just going to check out these motorcycles that span over the last 100 years. Should be good.
There it is, Washington State History Museum.
Let's ride. Alright, so the first bike that comes up when you get through is the Harley-Davidson Model K Sportster single saddle, and of course it's been restored. This is a 1956 version, and these Sportsters were made to compete with the import British motorcycles at the time. This one looks really not good condition there. Of course, it's got that classic V-twin that Harley's famous for. Alright, one more plug about the Model K Harley-Davidson Sportster. I know that Elvis Presley was seen on some of these bikes. The brake is on the left side, and the foot shifter is on the right. And that's no coincidence. Even though that wasn't American style, that was the British style during the period, and that is no coincidence that Harley-Davidson had purposely done that just for the Sportsters, to appeal to the younger generation that were buying British motorcycles at the time. And Harley's going strong today, so must have worked. Alright, here's a really rare motorcycle. This is the Flying Merkel. It looks like a board track racer just because of the bars there. And you can see there are no brakes on this bike, as was standard of that period. You basically just slow down or die. And this one in particular is a 1911 Flying Merkel. Very rare motorcycle. In early America, there were over 100 or 400 motorcycle manufacturers, and Flying Merkel was one of the good ones. I wish we could hear these things run. I mean, look at that engine with the down tube exhaust, that V-twin. Dang, that is a beautiful American machine right there. Alright, we're back on the Flying Merkel. I can't leave without seeing this machine again. It's the board track racer. And I just noticed some really cool things on here. The linkage here, I'm pretty sure that might be the oil dripper, oil pump. And of course they had the slogan that if it flew past you, it was a Flying Merkel. This is one of the great racers of the early 19th century and the turn of the century. To this day, I'm not sure what could have been in this on the board track. Another thing are these beautiful fuel tap lines. Wow, they twist. Down to exhaust. Cylinder heads are connected there. Get that, those beautiful valves, spring-loaded valves, very sexy. Pedal, start. Pedal start's pretty good for this time, considering a lot of bikes back then were push start. That's the Flying Merkel. Really rare American motorcycle. Here is an early Harley-Davidson single cylinder. Very beautiful machine with a wicker sidecar. White tires. Wow. Vintage Harley-Davidson hand shift, foot clutch. Very romantic. case you're wondering about the color, this is not a military version, this is a civilian model. They didn't really have color until DuPont came out with colors in the 1920s, early 1930s, during the Depression, so that cars and motorcycles could sell a lot faster. Because if you had cool colors, you sold a lot quicker than if you had olive drab. But these colors were more for just because they left these machines outside. They didn't have garages and whatever we had. I think they had barns, but that was about it. But out of all the Harleys here, this is probably the most romantic one. Wow, look at this. If I'm right, this is the first model Indian, one of the first. Camelback, they called it, because it had a camelback gas tank. And wow, look at that. Yep, Indian. This is my favorite American mark. And by the looks of this one, it is original and unrestored, which makes it that much more desirable. I saw one of these go out in an estate sale in just condition just like that, and it was about 30 grand. So beautiful motorcycle. So according to this stint here, this is an early 1906 Indian, and like I said before, it's the Camelback, which was made legendary by the founders of Indian themselves. I think Hendy, he rode this up a hill. He came up to a stop on the hill and then rode up it, which at the time a lot of motorcycles could not do. They just didn't have the power, where this one can get up to 30 miles an hour. This is one of two with the original paint, original tires, everything original, toolbox. Wow. Alright, to get back to what I was saying, there's a lot of people that came by, I didn't want to block them. That single cylinder, you can see, is in the frame here on the rear diamond well. Side valve, down tube exhaust. Of course, a very legendary motorcycle in the Indian company. This was the first model, successful model that they ever made and mass produced. Beautiful. Alright, coming from the Indian, we have two Excelsiors. Excelsior was the third branch of the main American motorcycles, including Harley-Davidson and Indian, and they say that Excelsiors were some of the fastest American motorcycles at the time. You can see here it's got the hand clutch, suicide shift style, leaf spring suspension, no brakes in the front, rear leather belt drive for the rear. Very beautiful. And this is a later model, 1915. The first one was a 1913. And wow, that's just as beautiful. Even more so. Of course, they got the long handlebars because they used to rubber mount the rider, not rubber mount the motor. And of course, Excelsior was bought by Ignaz Schwinn, who later, during the Depression, stopped making motorcycles and started making Schwinn bicycles. So these have become really rare in the past couple decades here. Wow. American engineering right there. Alright, getting back to the Excelsior. This is a 1915. I didn't know how advanced this was. Looking at it, I don't think these are acetylene lights. There are wires coming out, which means it must have been electric lights. Wow, for 1915, that's really advanced. I think Indian had electric lights in 1910, something like that. But for 1915, electric lights, leaf spring suspension, chain drive, V-twin, hand shift. Amazing American motorcycle. Here's an early 1917 Harley-Davidson bicycle. know, when motorcycles were too expensive to manufacture, they cost more than a car. It was a lot easier to make bicycles and, you know, sell some of those. Here's a really interesting Harley-Davidson. It is a 1914. This was a mail carrier motorcycle. It was used to carry the mail, and it delivered mail here in Seattle and could get up to 60 miles an hour. Wow, luminescent lighting, single mirror. Of course, period at the time, no front brake, pedal start, chain drive. Look at that. Wow, very innovative for its time. Here's another merchant motorcycle. It's the 1911 Yale 4P. Very beautiful color. They restored this one. Leather belt, single cylinder, pedal start. Wow. That exhaust system. Curves to the bottom. Very nice. This, of course, is an icon. This is an icon of America right here. This is the Indian Scout, considered by most people to be the best motorcycle Indian ever produced. This one looks like an original unrestored condition. I have no idea if it's running. It's final chain drive, no front brake, rear drum brake, single saddle. Wow, very beautiful motorcycle. This is one of my dream bikes back in the day. They're not the prettiest bikes, but they do look like the most romantic bikes ever produced in the world. This is a bike I don't know much about. I've never seen an Indian with this engine. Those are not stock bars. It looks like they were down to make it more race-like. It's a 1918 Indian Twin O Model Light. I've never seen this engine before. Opposing boxer twins right there. With the sexy spring-leaf valves setup. Wow. I'm gonna have to look into this bike. Of course, this is an Indian, America's first motorcycle. Alright, so here is some really interesting stuff. It's a 1916 Autoped scooter. So that's what scooters look like back at the turn of the century. You can see the engine was mounted on the wheel. Very interesting. Only I've seen other manufacturers do that, but mostly Germans with radial engines. And this is a Narracar. Of course, it was made and designed by C.A. Narrature. So it almost sounds like a Narracar. This is a very interesting design. Grand Tour style. This is a Pierce Arrow 1911. Wow, look at that. 4-cylinder. The only other manufacturers I know that were doing that were Henderson, which was bought by Excelsior. And then he later branched off to make Ace, and then was bought out by Indian. But I didn't know Pierce Arrow was also making 4-cylinder motorcycles. And that is a piece of art right there. And here is an American Motoscoot. I've seen these ones, but they've never interested me. And it's a Doodlebug scooter, 1947. Wow. That Pierce Arrow right there, that's looks like an amazing motor ride. Alright. You gotta give a plug-in to the Brits here. This is a Triumph Trophy. I rode in today on a Triumph Bonneville. The trophy was the more sportier version of the parallel twin that Triumph was producing at the time. And this particular one is a 1962. As you can see, my motorcycle is almost identical to this bike in terms of shape there. That is a beautiful motorcycle as well. Of course, throughout the 1960s, the Brits were the top manufacturers in motorcycling until the Japanese came out with their electric starts and disc brakes and all that in the late 1960s, early 70s. Wow, that Triumph is a beautiful motorcycle right there with pea shooter exhaust. This is a dirt bike here, racing bike, Hodoka Super Rat, circa 1970, single cylinder, and that makes for a lot of fun on a weekend. Wow, this is the crown jewel center stand here. This is Indian 4 from the looks of it, with a sidecar 1940. Of course, the original Indian company went out in 1953, and Harley-Davidson became the last stand of the American motorcycle. But Indian is back, and in August they are coming out with a new motorcycle, probably a Chief. They are now owned by Polaris. And that right there, my friends, is one of the crown jewels in this collection here. Wow. Oh, I forgot to plug in on the engine. This is an Indian 4-cylinder. After they bought out Henderson. Wow. Gotta give a plug out to these motorcycle racers. Of course, there are all the romantic stories that come with motorcycling. This is on Tammy with her Triumph here, and that's her jersey. The skid plate shoe, of course, for dirt track racing. And beautiful, beautiful place. This right here is a really rare motorcycle. It was the best American motorcycle at the time. Overhead valves, as you can see. Very rare for 1918. This is Steve McQueen's 1918 Pope motorcycle. Steve McQueen had personally bought this one in 1979. And it is a very beautiful motorcycle. I've never seen one in person, and I have finally saw one. It's got all the bells and whistles. Of course, that's what made these famous. All the overhead valves. Wow. Kickstart. Very rare at that time. Not many manufacturers were using that. Scott and Pope were some of the few. Hand shift, suicide clutch, leaf spring suspension. Wow. Alright, I gotta give another plug into this bike. I can't get over it. How advanced it was for its time. It's even got rear suspension and spring seated suspension. By the looks of it, it probably works. Luminescent lighting there. Of course, that V-twin overhead valve. Can't believe that a machine like this existed in 1918. Chain drive. Of course, because it was owned by Steve McQueen, it's worth so much more now. But that's a piece of an American history. that is so advanced for its time, and it's a shame that Pope went out of business. To today's technology, this is the Brammo. It is the most advanced electric motorcycle out there right now at the time that I am speaking, and this has been engineered pretty well, I'd say. I'm not sure how much mileage you get, maybe 42 miles or something like that. They also make a sport bike, which is way more advanced than this, but for now this company is doing pretty good in the electric motorcycle range since everyone's going green. Chain drive, microchips, and batteries. Back in the Indian section, of course. And it makes me sad that I can't even sit on this after years of wanting to ride on one. It's such a beautiful machine. I wish I could just take a seat on it. There's no one around. But if I did that on camera, I think I'd get in trouble. What a beautiful Indian Scout. Just a pretty bike. A lot of sex appeal. Short stub V-twin. Wow. Beautiful. Alright, here's the picture of the original owner, Frank Richardson Pierce, when the circa 1920 Indian Scout was brand new. That was near Snoqualmie Pass. And here it is today. Very beautiful and restored machine. As you can see here. Hand shift, hand oil pump, spring seat, V-twin, electric lights, amp meter, backbone frame. Wow. Probably the best Indian in this whole collection here. At least my favorite Indian here. Alright, I think it's time we say bye to this place and basically wake up into reality and fall out of the dream.